we learn about the plague, the Magefa, that is ravaging through the ranks of the Jewish people only after it is well underway. We find out about it when Moshe Rabbeinu, in a moment of great urgency, turns to his brother Aaron HaKohen and tells him in a very urgent tone to take action. Vayomer Moshe el Aaron, kach et hamachta v'ten aleh ha'esh me'al mizbech v'sim ketoret. Moshe says to Aaron, take the fire pan, put fire on it, meaning hot coals that you take off the mizbech, off the altar, and put incense offering upon that, the ketoret. V'holech mehera, go quickly, el ha'edah, to the nation, to the assembly. V'chaper alehem, atone for them, ki yatza ketzer lifnei Hashem, hechel hanagef, because the wrath has emerged from before Hashem, the plague has begun. Vayikach Aaron kasher diber Moshe, and Aaron took, as Moshe told him, vayaratz, he ran, el toch hakahal, v'hinei hechel hanegev ba'am. Behold, the plague had begun in the midst of the nation. Vayitein rektoret, vayichaper ha'am, and he places the incense, spices on top of the fire pan with the coals, and he atones for the nation. Vayamod ben ametim v'nachayim, v'teyatzar ha'magefa, and he stood between the living and the dead, and the plague ceased. And then we learn about the terrible toll of this plague. Vayu ametim b'magefa, arba'a asar elef ushva me'ot, milvad hametim al dvar Korach. 14,700 people died in this plague. And that's in addition to the people who died during the story involving Korach at the beginning of the Parsha. Aaron returned to Moshe to the entryway of the tent of the meeting, and the plague ceased. So what do you want to see in Parshat Korach? To be sure, the beginning of the Parsha tells us that the Parsha is about machloket, about strife, about rebellion, about death. It's a story about leaders of an emotionally attenuated people in the extreme who are frustrated by the reality that they just have to wait, by their sense of feeling stuck, and who are now projecting that onto Moshe. And of course, Korach and his minions were waiting for their opportunity to rebel. But the element of the malleability of the people to listen to the voice of the mob is, of course, much more readily apparent. And the leaders themselves, Vayipol al panav, Vayiplo al panahem, several times in the Parsha, Moshe and Ali just fall on their faces. The rage of the mob prevents them from even getting a word in edgewise. You might say they couldn't even be heard through their masks over the din of the chattering classes. But also, the themes of this Parsha include the following: that when the plague comes, and they knew why the plague was coming. We don't know why our plague has come. But when their plague came, Moshe turned to his brother and he said, it's time for action. It's time for Mesirut Nefesh, for self-sacrifice. It's time for showing one's love for the people, attempting to save and to heal as many people as possible. So what do you want to take from this Parsha? Let's take the love and the healing. But I want to share with you that I also see beyond the plague, on a certain level, I also see a certain symmetry for us as congregation or Torah. You know, the last Shabbat we spent together in Shul was Parshat Ki Tisa, which is, within it is contained what's known as Parshat HaKetoret, all of the ingredients for the incense offering for the Ketoret. In fact, that's what I spoke about, how Rabbi Akiva Eger in the 19th century told the Jews of Eastern Europe who were suffering mightily under a cholera epidemic that one of the things they needed to do was to recite the Parshat HaKetoret each and every day in their tefillah. You can find at the beginning of the Siddur in the Korbanot section. Also, of course, to do tshuva and to be able to do a certain chesed nefesh, an inner analysis of what is it that perhaps are my priorities in life as a Jew and a human being that maybe fell by the wayside, that perhaps the plague now refocuses me upon those true priorities. Also, he warned the people not to be too worried, not to be too scared. Concern was one thing, but too much da'aga, too much worry would not be healthy. We spoke about that the last Shabbat together in Shul. And now here we are, the first Shabbat of at least some, although by no means all or even most of our Shul, but some members of the Shul are going to try a little bit to go back this Shabbat, the Shabbat where Ketoret features so heavily. The Rashi in our Parsha tells us that the Ketoret was chaviva mikol korban, it was most precious of all of the offerings. And that indeed, at the same time, even as precious as it was, the Sam HaMavet Natun B'tocho, there was a certain elixir of death that was mixed within it. Everyone knew the story of Nadav and Avihu, that they had been incinerated by the Ketoret, because the Ketoret is both the mechanism for the test, but it's also an instrument of salvation. The Ketoret itself is a form of a korban, which in a certain way, more than the rest of korbanot, the word korban means, of course, lekarev, to come closer. Hakriv is not just to offer something, but to engage in an act of becoming more proximal, of approaching. So the Ketoret meant that. And it means also, though, commensurate with coming closer, he's being held to a higher account and a higher standard. Bet hakadosh v'ikriv elav, bet asher yivcha yakriv elav. Moshe tells Korach and his minions, the one that is sacred, that's the one that God will bring close to him on account of the Ketoret, and the one that he will choose, that's the one that he will bring close to him. And yet, when we think of this, we also think of its tragic dimension. As one climbs higher on the mountain of Hashem, it becomes a steeper climb. Nadav and Avihu were described by the Torah itself as bekorvatam lifnei Hashem v'yamutu. In their coming closer to Hashem, they died as a result of it. They climbed high. They attempted to soar, but sadly, they paid with their lives. Moshe tells his own brother in the immediate aftermath that that's what Hashem said, Bikrovai ekadesh, through my holy ones, and those who I'm closest to, rather, will I become sanctified. But we ought to ask the question fairly. If you look carefully in the Torah, Moshe speaks to Aaron. It never says that Hashem tells Moshe, this is what you should do in case of a plague. How did Moshe know? Well, it turns out Moshe learned it from the most unlikely of sources. The Gemara Masechet Shabbat tells us that he learned it from none other than the Malach HaMavet, the angel of death. Rabbi Shubin Levi teaches the Gemara Masechet Shabbat and Daf Peichet that when Moshe Rabbeinu b'Shas Sha'ala Moshe Lamar, when we went on high, the angels asked rhetorically, Mali Yeludi Shah Beinenu, what is one born of woman doing in our midst? And it goes on to describe their sense of righteous indignation, that Moshe was going to take this divine document from the supernal realms and give it to beings who are so imperfect and frail and flawed. And Moshe, says Hashem, give some arguments. Figure out how you're going to respond to these charges. And Moshe asks the angels, did you ever suffer under the thumb of slavery in Egypt? We did. And the Torah says, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt, the house of slavery. He asks them, do you have temptations? Do you have jealousies? Do you need mitzvot preventing murder and thievery and adultery? Do you need a Shabbat because you are weary, or to be told to respect your parents, you who have no parents? Miyad, immediately at the end of this argument, everyone became beloved to Moshe, and each one gave Moshe a gift. Af malach hamavet maser lo davar. Even the angel of death, says the Gemara, gave Moshe Rabbeinu a gift. Let each person understand this story on their own level. The beauty of the Agadah is that it can be understood by a child and by the greatest sage, each person on their own level. Let's each of us understand it on our level. Indeed, the pasuk that's mentioned, Vayitin al-Ketoret vayichaper al-ha'am, and he placed the Ketoret and he atoned for the nation from Parshat Korach. The Gemara says, Ilav da Amar le, if no one had told Moshe Rabbeinu what to do, mihava yada, how did he know? Ergo, he learned it there, on Har Sinai. From who? From the angel of death. Ribbono Sha'olam. Even the Malach HaMavet was won over by the realization that is precisely our frailty, our flaws, our imperfections that make the Torah right for us. It's the guide for life for human beings. Aaron HaKohen, the great lover of Klal Yisrael, just a few psukim after members of the nation, and it seems as if that undecided majority is swaying even towards the rebel side, who are so critical of Moshe and of Aaron. He stands there and he offers the Ketoret and declares, I love the Jewish people despite their failures. Through what medium? Through what instrument? The Ketoret. The Gemara teaches Masachet Kritud Amar of Chana bar Bizna of Shimon Chasida, Kol Tanit she'ein b'mi poshe Yisrael ein a Tanit, any fast which results from a crisis for the Jewish people that does not include within it the transgressors of Israel. In that fast, it's not a proper fast. Shaharei chel ben arei chara, because after all, there was a certain bad smell that came from one of the ingredients of the Ktoret, the chelbana. And nonetheless, nonetheless, it was included among the 11 ingredients of the Ktoret to teach us that when you want to use an instrument or some mechanism to do tshuva, you must have the Rishayim, the Poshei Yisrael, the transgressors and the wicked ones, being counted as part of the Jewish nation. The odious, paradoxically, serve as crucial ingredients in our plea to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem, please stop the plague. We're so imperfect, we're so flawed, and we're so frail. And you gave us a Torah Chaim. We want to live by that Torah. The giving of the Torah, though, is only the first element of what the Malach HaMavet taught Moshe Rabbeinu. Rashi noted that the Torah, the Gemara rather, quotes two psukim from Parshat Korach. The first one is the placing of the incense, but the second pasuk that the Gemara quotes says Ve'omer, and another verse that seems to be what the Malach HaMavet taught Moshe Rabbeinu is Vayamud ben Ametim ben Chaim. He stood between the dead and the living. Rashi says Lahaktir Machtot Ktor B'Shat Magefa, to offer the incense in the time of a plague. Ve'lamud ben Ametim ben Chaim. Both the Haktara of the Ktoret and the ability to stand between the dead and the living, serving as both a bridge and as a bulwark between them. The function of Aaron Cohen standing with that fire pan between the dead and the living is to tell the people very simply, I am with you now, and we're all in this together. We, you and I, Klal Yisrael, the world entire, are standing between the dead and the living. Regardless of whether we're healthcare professionals or not, we're standing now, and we need to have the courage to continue to stand. One part of dealing with this plague is no doubt the Haktara of the Ktoret, the petitioning on high, the taking whatever mechanisms and measures we can on our level to try to stay away from getting the virus by staying fast to our commitments to the social distancing, etc., and not acting and doing things without guidance of medical professionals. That's what our Hashivenu committee has been trying to do for us. That's what our leadership's been trying to do. That's what now our ritual committee is trying to do. As now we go into our shul, again, only a few of the members of the shul relative to the membership are going to be able to feel ready to do that or register to come this Shabbat. But to realize that the other part is to have the courage to stand and to stand together. The Chatam Sofer noted that while we don't do the Ktoret anymore, we don't have incense offerings, we do have a representation of it in our Beit Knesset. And I hope for those who are coming to shul now or thinking about our shul and shuls like it in their mind's eye, they'll think about this. The Chatam Sofer writes in his tshuva, in Orach Chaim, Chaf Chet, Habima shalanu umedet bifnim kimizbeach hapnimi. Our bima in the center of the shul, inside where we read our Sefer Torah, that's meant to be a stand-in for the mizbeach hapnimi, the inner altar where they offered the Ktoret. Al kain ra'ui la'amido be'emtza. You should put it be'emtza in the middle of the Beit HaKnesset, l'damoto leBeit HaMikdash, in order to create a parallel to remind us of the Beit HaMikdash, b'chol afshri as much as possible. Ve'ein l'shanu b'mikdash ma'at shlanu. We should not deviate from this in our Mikdash Ma'at. As some of us return to our Mikdash Ma'at this Shabbat, as others are waiting to do so. Unlike the Magefa of Parshat Korach, whose cause was well known, we live in the fog of not knowing. And yet, we read Parshat Korach and the Parsha of the Ktoret, and we see it both as an instrument of getting closer to Hashem and a test, but also as a measure of healing and of salvation. Let's hope we see those themes together in Parshat Korach. Let's hope that sometime soon we will be able to hear the declaration that the plague has ended. Until then, let's keep offering our Ktoret, Bimakri Vei Ktoret, through our words, through our tefillot, and also through our courage to be able to stand ben Achaim ben Ametim and to stand together. Shabbat Shalom.